You guys can hear me.
Sounds good.
Are you the fanatic we're looking for? Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, part of the Draft Professor Podcast Network. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's episode. We look forward to seeing you in a couple of seconds. Daily Draft Podcast. My name's Jim, joined today by Jake and Walt. Jake, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm having a good day so far. It's a happy Tuesday, not my normal scheduled hour, but I'm ready to talk some secondary today and get out of these linebackers and running backs that we've been covering for this last month and a half. So it's going to be a fun day for sure.
Fantastic. Hey, Walt, welcome to the channel. How you doing?
I'm great. Feeling great to be here. Really appreciate it. Ready to talk some football, some DBs, some corners, some safeties, some hybrids, some corners that may be safeties at the next level. A lot of stuff. I'm really happy to be here, though. Really appreciate it.
Cool. Well, we will dive right into it. And Jake, you want to share your scouting report on Andrew Mukuba, the safety from Texas?
Yeah, Mukuba, he's a fun prospect. I have him at 6 foot, 195. The dude's a speed demon. I mean, he definitely has the athleticism to thrive at the next level. Comes out, starts over at Clemson for several years before ending up transferring over to Texas this past year to just kind of come out and say, hey, I'm that dude. And he gets to pair up with a lot of these Texas defenders. And there's a reason they are touted as highly as they are going into the playoffs for the first time ever. So it should be fun. I think he's kind of a Swiss Army knife. He kind of did quite a few different things over there at Clemson, and then coming over to Texas. I mean, I think he is scheme versatile. I think he probably projects best as that nickel to free safety type. You definitely want him out there on passing downs. Dude's a ball hawk. 4 picks this season. I think he's only allowed 12 catches as well. So that just kind of tells you and is a testament to what he's doing out there at coverage. But at the same time, I like him in the open field. Dude brings down players for sure. He is the opposite of Tyreek Hill or Nick Cannon. He wraps up. He wraps it up there. So I really like that. I think where he could improve is he's got to get in the weight room. 195. You have him even listed at 190. I think he's got to get a little bit more. Added another scoop of protein into those shakes for him. He'll get there. He's not too small, but I think he does lack experience as that single high. We see in the NFL they're running a lot of these split safety schemes now. So that might be a big concern for some NFL teams, but it should be of note that he just needs to get a little bit more experience there, in my opinion. I see him as an early day 2 guy. I'd probably project him second round, maybe even early third round potentially. If there's somebody in the bottom of the first even that just is high in it for the speed, I could see him being that late first kind of slip into the end of the day 1 even. So I think you're drafting him to be that starting nickel / free safety for you early in his career.
So Walt, what do you think?
I couldn't really agree more. I actually had an early third round grade on him. If you look at the lack of size, he's 6 foot, 188, 190. It's a good chance he gets to the NFL. He may get to 198, 199, maybe 200. Some guys put on that weight. Some guys don't. But for sure, if you look at the direction the NFL is going in, more teams are going to those 4-2-5 looks. Everybody's got a nickel out there pretty much every single play. I think he's more of a nickel than a safety. Texas moved him to safety, oddly enough, and he's playing almost his best football of his career. And he was playing good football at Clemson as well. I think he's just a really good football player. And if you look at everything, like, okay, so the smallest frame, the main issue I have with it is the fact that he throws his body around a lot. He's a willing tackler. He's a corner, and we're going to get into another corner later on in the video who he's the counter to, but he's not a corner that I would have to go tell to go tackle. He's not the biggest guy, and I don't have to tell him to go actually tackle. But he throws his body around a lot. So smallish frame, under 190, teetering 190, smallest shoulders. Kind of, to me, feels like a guy who's destined to be hurt a lot, especially if he's not a technique tackler and he's willingly throwing his body around. And I appreciate that as a corner. At least you put forth the effort, but the small frame, the fact that he throws his body around so much does kind of concern me. If I go through my report, I have here very explosive around the line of scrimmage for a player of his build, like I was just speaking on, his aggressiveness and his confidence. Like I said, I don't have to tell him to go tackle. He'll go get somebody. He opens up his hips very quickly and smoothly when attacking wide receivers leverage. And I think that's very key too. A lot of guys, a lot of corners, they can cover in east, maybe south, east, maybe west. But when you ask them to rotate to each, they can't do it. That's how a lot of receivers get beat across their face constantly. And if you're constantly getting beat across the face, you're going to be on the bench. He and about three other corners I want to talk about tonight have a great ability to fluidly open up their hips inside and break on those leverage routes. Really good at that. Very alert player. Very alert player. He and I would say probably Walley of Minnesota are two of the more alert players in this class when it comes to playing the football as well as closing on routes. Feet are excellent, transitioning in and out of short areas as well. He's got some of the best feet, I think, in this class, and it's kind of expected. Once you start talking about shorter corners, 5'9", 5'10", 5'11", 180, 185, 190, you expect those guys to be fast. You expect those guys to have really quick feet, good feet. Once you start talking about the 6'2 corners, the 6'3 corners, you kind of give them a little bit more leeway and expect them to not be as good. You expect them almost to be as choppier than the smaller corners. But I think he's a really good football player. I don't expect him to test really great. If you look at Wiggins, who came out of Clemson a year ago, very fast player. Expected him to play fast. He played fast. You expected him to test fast, and he did. I think Andrew is more short area quickness fast, which to me is more important.
Definitely.
Honestly. You can be out if you got long speed, I love it. But the problem is this: people get so caught up in long speed, me included, because I love it. Everybody loves a fast corner.
Highlights look great.
Yeah, but typically nobody's just dropping back and throwing the ball deep without play action. So more than likely, you're only going to get beat deep if you're biting. And you're only biting on routes because you've seen them so often that now you're scared of them. And I don't think he has the necessary long speed, but I think he can be a really solid corner at the next level. Now, I've seen a lot of publications that have him as an undrafted free agent. I don't think that's true. I think, like you said, he's probably around a third-round guy. Once you get past the boundary corners, the traits guys that everybody likes to take in the first round, high second round, and you start getting into the smallest corners, the guys that really fill out your cornerback room, I think he'll be spearheading that crew.
So, question. So, Jake, you said you had a early second on him.
Yeah, I would say early day two. I mean, yeah, it's probably second round. Okay. I could see him falling to the third, but like I said, if there's a guy out there, a defensive coordinator, that I could see somebody falling in love with him. So it's a guy to definitely keep an eye on for sure, especially as we see him play these last couple games of his career, we're assuming, over there at Texas. I mean, sky's the limit for the kid. We're looking at a starter in the secondary.
So my question was, where do you see his playmaking ability? Like last year, there were two safeties that went in round two. One was Newbin, and I believe Bishop went to Buffalo in round two. How would you compare him to round two safeties from last year?
I would put him right in the middle of those. I would have had Newbin above him, and I would have Bishop. Bishop wasn't even my safety two coming out. So, I mean, I would have him considerably higher than him. My kind of, I always like writing down these little comps for him. That's not a player. I wrote down Death Wish Coffee. If you know, you know, but it's kind of, they say they're the most caffeinated coffee in the world. And I think you see that in his tape. He's high energy, Quick impact, but occasionally unpredictable. You don't know what it's going to hit you when you need it to hit you. And you might have to find a bathroom pretty quick when you're drinking coffee. So he's a little chaotic. You love him. Somebody's going to love that speed and versatility. So I think teams are going to covet him pretty highly just for that. And he's very scheme versatile.
Yep. So, Walt, where would you have Mukuba relative to Nubin?
I would have him in that tier 2. Nubin was my number. Yeah, Nubin was my number 1 guy last year. I felt he had the size, he had the physicality in the run game as far as coming up and run support. He for sure had the ball skills. I just thought he was the best safety in last year's class. I forgot exactly who was my number 2 guy, but I think
it's
he's
the
a
guy
really
that
good...
went to San Francisco, right? Because was Mustafa the one that went to San Francisco? I don't know what round they took him in, though.
If I remember correctly, I had Cam Kitchens as my safety 2 off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah, it may have been Cam Kitchens. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's focus on Jalen Catalon from UNLV. Walt, you want to take this one away?
Sure. I texted you a couple of days ago, remember, and I said I forgot Jalen Catalon was even in college football. Like, that's how long it's been. I did an overview on him 2 years ago when he was still at Arkansas. He's a guy I felt probably should have came out that year. He was eligible to come out that year. Probably would have been late 4th, early 5th round pick. Stuck around. Don't know why he stuck around so long, but he stuck around a couple more years. 5'11", a little over 200 pounds. Pretty much an old school box type of safety. Doesn't really have the necessary athleticism, I believe, to cover consistently on the back end against high-end athletes in the NFL. But if you're looking for somebody that can play in the box, once again, a lot of these safeties are going to make money now because a lot of teams are going to that 4-2-5 look. They are putting more DBs out there, playing dime more as much as possible. And there's room for guys like him now. 2 safety high, I'm not thinking that at all. But here's the thing about Catalon that kind of scares me. He's had so many injuries throughout his career in college. You factor that with the fact that he's got his age going against him. He's been in college as long as he's been. For some people, that's a death sentence. They look at the fact that you've been in college so long. Why have you been there so long? And on top of that, he's been injured. And on top of that, he doesn't really have like the high-end physical traits. I do think he's a good football player. But like I said, it's going to be scheme determined. You know, if you're a team that likes to still play with a safety in the box consistently, a guy around sniffing around the line of scrimmage, similar to like my Detroit Lions do, you may consider a guy like him. I'm not sure if he gets drafted, mainly because of the injury history alone. And pairing that with the age, a lot of organizations will shy away from a guy like him, feel like they can probably get Jalen Catalon, undrafted free agent.
So, Jake, what do you think?
No, I definitely think Walt hit a lot of that on the head. I think what you're kind of wanting out of Catalon is he is a high football IQ type of guy. I think athleticism might not be his best trait, but I think this is a guy that can come in kind of year one, and he's going to be in the film room. I think he knows what he's looking at, and that kind of translates to the field. I do agree his best seasons were probably at Arkansas. He ends up transferring to Texas. And unlike Mukuba, he didn't take that next step, which leads him to landing in Vegas with UNLV. Hopefully he's kind of resurged that. I think at this point in time, you're looking for a guy to be a special teams monster for you. I don't think this is a guy that's going to play significant snaps for you by any means. The size concerns, this is not a guy that you want to line up against a 6'5" tight end. It just isn't. It's unfortunate. And then he's made of glass. He's made of porcelain. The injuries, the durability just isn't there. So the dude, he's a gas station scratch off. If you hit on it, it's a medium return. And if you don't, it's nothing. So at the end of the day, you're spending a 7th round pick on him. It's not the end of the world if it doesn't hit. But yeah, again, I would like him as maybe a preferred undrafted free agent. See what you got there. It's kind of funny that he ends up in Vegas, the gambling capital of the world, and we're talking about scratch-offs, I think. But there's going to be lots of lists that come out as we progress and get closer to April, and it's going to say, NFL drafts hidden gems, NFL drafts sleepers, last chance flyers. Catalan's going to be on a lot of those lists, but at the end of the day, I don't know if it's going to mean anything for his draft stock.
Okay.
I got a quick question.
Go for it.
Quick question. Any possibilities, even though this guy actually played off-ball linebacker when he was in college, David Long Jr. David Long Jr. is relatively around the same size. I'm pretty sure Catalan, somebody, if he gets drafted, they're probably going to try to turn him into a linebacker, a coverage linebacker. He has his coverage liabilities as far as on the back end. I think he's solid. As far as if you ask him to have everything in front of him, he's good. So I think he can still be a decent safety, a decent strong safety coverage-wise, intermediate to mid. Or is he potentially a linebacker? Because he does have a decent amount of physicality. He's a good tackler. But then, you also bring in the injuries into play. But my thing is this, if he's going to get hurt in the NFL, he's going to get hurt playing safety, linebacker, corner, wherever you decide to put him.
Yeah, I see that a lot on tape, and I think David Long Jr., he's come a long ways, and he had those years where he was elite, and he got paid for it. But again, we come back to those injuries concerns in that right, too. There's a reason the Tennessee Titans didn't re-sign him to that contract and ended up letting him walk. I think what made David Long very special, though, is his ability to slip under blocks and not to allow linemen to get into his body. And I don't know if Catalan has, he might, because we just haven't seen it. So I think that's a guy that you can maybe plug in there, and he's not any similar in size to a guy like James Williams that came out last season. But I think that might be his only opportunity to actually see significant snaps for a defense, maybe. And maybe this is a project that you draft in the late 7th round and you work him in there those first 2-3 years and let him develop. Maybe you can get there, but then again, we come back to those age concerns. He's one of the oldest prospects we're talking about today, and maybe it's already passed him by. Maybe not. Maybe he just needed another year to recover from those injuries, and he'll come out next season and he'll put it all together. Maybe we'll see that guy that was a Razorback back in the day.
Yeah. So Catalan's probably, we're putting together notes for a podcast on players which are like 24 years old and like how has their draft stock fluctuated over time. He's probably a good candidate for that if you think that he would have been round 4 a couple of years ago and now he's relatively close to undraftable. Let's flip to Sage Ryan from LSU. Walt, you want to kick this one off?
Sure. Big time recruit coming out of high school, as big as a 4-star can be. Very versatile player. I think this draft is full of guys like him too, around that same height, size, 5'11", a little over 200 pounds. Very physical player. Plays at his best when everything is in front of him. Another guy, I think he's more probably a zone-free safety at the next level. A lot of corner at LSU. I don't think he's a corner at the next level. I just see too much stiffness in the hips. He's a good enough athlete. Just don't think he's good enough. Kind of thick-legged. Overall, very stocky type of body. If I go into my actual scouting report, like I said, had versatile player, good solid frame, as I just mentioned. He's another guy you don't have to tell him to go tackle. He's going to go tackle. He's really instinctful in zone, good enough athlete. Like I said, not a great one. He's not the most explosive, quick, twitchy, changing directions. And that tends to be a death sentence for a lot of corners. You can be straight line fast. You can backpedal good. You can stop and go pretty solid. If you can't go east or west, man, you're going to get put in the blender. And you stand no chance against guys like CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, St. Brown, Jamar Chase. Not to mention dealing with the DK Metcalfs of the world, the guys who are 6'4" and run 4.2. So it's almost a death sentence as a corner in this day and age if you don't have some sort of elite physical traits. Whether it's change of direction, short area quickness, long speed, size, length, ball skills. You have to have something that you can hang your hat on. And sometimes just being a jack of all trades, a guy that's just good at a lot of stuff, is good in certain situations, but you're almost dependent on getting drafted by the right organization. like all these kids are for the most part. If you're a guy that's not a great athlete, but you're a Swiss Army knife, you need a good coach, a solid coach, a coach that actually knows what the hell he's doing. And a lot of these types of players end up with bad teams, with bad coaching. They don't know how to use them, and they get shelved, and they never see the light of day. So he's another guy I think is tailor made to play safety at the next level. He's really good when everything is in front of him. Very instinctive player. His short area quickness is good enough for 0 to 15 yards. And I don't think he's inadequate in pass coverage, but it takes a different level, I think, of athleticism to cover the type of guys we cover, in the NFL, or you have to deal with in the NFL. So considering where he came at hype-wise coming out of high school, he's been a really good player for LSU. I think he has, but I would give him somewhere around the 5th, maybe the 6th round, because this class overall has too many players, I believe, who are better athletes, naturally at the safety position, as well at the cornerback position. And then guys like him, naturally being seniors, get pushed down the list.
So, Jake, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of it. Like what I was saying, maybe not an uber athlete by any means. And I'll say fans in LSU, they are not a fan of Sage Ryan. I looked him up just to see what fans were saying, and not many nice things were said. And I think that comes with the territory. College football fans, not known for being rational by any means. I think Sage Ryan is a perfectly fine player, and I think he's kind of developing. And I think LSU played him out of position a lot this season. I saw him out there playing outside corner at times. No need for that. I think no need for that. Let's get away from that. I think the biggest concern for me is the angles he takes to get to the football. Dude is like my Apple map. Sometimes it tells me to turn left when it should be turning right. I think that's something that's got to get fixed. And that's something that gives me concern because I don't know how coachable that is at the next level. It's kind of one of those things you got or you don't. He does have one more year of eligibility. I know he hasn't declared just yet. I haven't seen anything about him going to the Hula Bowl, East or West Shrine, or anything like that. So I see this as maybe a candidate to enter this portal as we kind of open up this as of yesterday, this transfer portal. This might be a guy that we see enter late into this and maybe he ends up somewhere else. I think it could be potentially good for him. I think tackling, he's a pretty sure tackler. I mean, missed tackle percentage was like 11%. It's not bad at all. I would like to see less. Dude was a fan of WWE growing up because he's throwing Goldberg spears every chance he gets. I would like to maybe see him use that technique, wrap up a little bit more because I don't know how well it's going to work with higher talent playing against him. But I mean, he's in the SEC, so it's going to take a step, but I mean, it's not going from the MAC to the NFL. I do see him as zone only. That's going to have him. He's going to see a wide range on draft boards for NFL teams just based on that alone. And I see him as specifically slot defender. I don't know if I want to see him back there in the box or a free safety or these splits. I think at the end of the day, he hasn't really progressed ever since we saw him in 2021. I see that same exact player, which is kind of concerning. You would hope he would be taking those next step forwards, and I really haven't seen that. So he's been a fine player since day one. He's still a fine player now. I would like him to see him go from good to great in those progressive seasons, though. I think I would probably have a 6th round grade on him as of right now. But like I said, I'd probably like to see him come back for one more year, and maybe that can turn into a 4th or 5th round pick, maybe.
Okay. So we're going to flip now. Instead of covering safeties, we're going to flip to corners. So now we're going to cover Devin Kirkwood from UCLA. So Jake, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, we're talking long boys today. 6'3", 205. We were talking about it before the show. You don't see this many tall corners come out in past drafts. Since I've covered the draft, I've never seen this many come out. But 6'3", I mean, it speaks for itself. Anytime you see a corner that tall, though, you have to worry about the footwork. And we talk about oily hips a lot when we're talking corners. He might need some WD-40 there. But zone coverage wizard, I think. again, talking zone coverage, guys, I would like to see him in a cover 2S, cover 3 scheme. I think that's where he's going to thrive. Athleticism is not an over concern. I think he's got enough speed for that size. So you like to see that. If the NFL doesn't work out, this dude is going to wreck shop at all local YMCAs playing small forward across the league. He's got that dog in him, I think. So at the end of the day, I still see him as probably a day 3 target for somebody. I could see somebody liking that length that he has to allow him to play cover 2 and getting that press man-esque zone schemes and really, really like what he sees. At the end of the day, I really liked his tape. I would just like to see a little bit more from him. And again, just a junior. So this guy, by no means do we know he's going to be there in April right now.
So, Walt, what do you think?
I think the footwork needs some refining, but once again, it goes back to what Jake just said and what we were talking about earlier in the video. Taller corners, you start talking about guys like maybe Tariq Woolen. I can't comment on too many other ones, but Woolen is one of those 6'3", 6'4" corners that has the elite footwork, the elite stop and go. You don't see too many of those guys. So I guess you gotta kind of grade the 6'3", 6'4" corners on the curve, kind of in their own vacuum. But he's an experienced corner. He's played a ton of football at UCLA. He's seen a ton of different wide receivers. As you mentioned, he's long, he's athletic for his size. Not the most elite athlete for his size, but good ball skills, got a huge catch radius. He's not the most explosive athlete, when you ask him to do too much, once again, east-west. And that goes back to the hips. You mentioned the hips, I'm going to mention the hips. Covering wide receivers is more than just speed. You cover wide receivers with your feet, you cover wide receivers with your eyes. Watch the hips, watch the feet. Corners who touch too much, corners who grab too much, they're destined to be a penalty magnet. And when you're a penalty magnet, you lose money in the NFL and you wind up on the street. He has to learn how, and this is something else I want to get into, I think, a lot of times with corners, because we're evaluating the player. We have no idea what type of coaching they're getting. They could be getting complete crap coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys could get to the NFL, because we're going to talk about a guy in a little while who transferred and got a hell of a lot better under better coaching at a better program. And some of these guys get to the NFL and they shock you. And you look back at your draft board and you say, damn, I was wrong about this guy. And I was wrong about him. And I was wrong about him too. Because maybe they got to the NFL and they got better coaching. But he's also another guy that's very instinctful, playing with his face to the football. So, safety. Once again, I feel like the 205 kind of scares me because it's a very lean 205. And most guys who spend 4 years in a college football program and don't get over 200 pounds, whether it's a wide receiver, even though I do understand some position coaches want their wide receivers under 200. Some don't want their corners over 205, 210, none of that matter. But typically, if for a corner, for a dude that height with that type of body frame, to not get past 205 after 4 years, I doubt if he's going to get any bigger at the next level. So that could possibly be a problem, because these wide receivers are getting bigger and stronger. So they can get in there with you as far as zone, just with you. So I would say Kirkland right now is a guy that you might be able to get, because once again, he's another guy, played a ton of football, very experienced, not the most high-end athlete. A lot of these guys' ultimate fate will be decided once they get to the combine. We start seeing shuttles, cone drills, 40 times vertical leaps, on the pro day times or whatnot. But as of right now, watching him on film, I just don't think he's as explosive as an athlete he may need to be. So, and you pairing that with the age, the amount of reps he's had, which is kind of counter to what I said. Experience can be a positive, experience can be a negative. But I see a guy who could probably be gotten as an undrafted free agent. And you know how the NFL is. If they view you as a 7th round pick, they probably view you as somebody that they don't have to draft. And they can call immediately after the draft, for that matter. So I think he's a guy who's a borderline 7th, maybe undrafted free agent.
So, Jake, what round did you see him in?
I would say there's going to be a team that I think is going to covet him just for his size and what he brings to a zone-based scheme. So I could see him hopping into the 5th round. I would probably say, based on what I saw, I would probably say 6th round, kind of split the difference, 5th to 6th.
Got it. Okay. Next up, Thaddeus Dixon from Washington. So, Walt, you want to kick this one off?
Sure. So Thaddeus Dixon, a natural corner, natural man cover corner. I'm pretty sure Jake can understand what I'm going to say. Sometimes when you watch corners, before you get a chance to see their vertical, their 40, how they look at their uniform, how they interact with their teammates, whatever, you just watch them go out there and cover people. And you say, I don't give a damn about what his measurables are. That guy can cover people. Not sure how high end of an athlete he is. Dixon can cover. You rarely ever see him beat. He doesn't get called for a ton of penalties. He's very physical in coverage. He reminds me a little bit of Devin Witherspoon. He's not as physical as Witherspoon in run support. Witherspoon was a monster. He was teach tape for a lot of these corners out here who are terrified to tackle. But I do think that Thaddeus Dixon, somebody's going to like him. Somebody's going to like him if he comes out. It all depends on, same thing with all these other corners in the draft who will be coming out. How well do you test? Because we've seen guys who are really good football players not test well and fall for no rational reason. Brian Branch, there was no reason for Brian Branch to be drafted where the hell he was drafted. Aside from a 4.5 40. You know, it's ridiculous. I had Brian Branch mocked to the New England Patriots in the middle of that first round, and I was stunned when he was still on the board for my Detroit Lions where they got him at. So sometimes the NFL just gets it wrong with some of these players. Thaddeus Dixon is a guy that can cover, though, and I think once GMs start really going through the tape, because at the end of the day, you need guys, whether they have high-end physical traits or not. You need guys that just have a knack to be able to cover. Thaddeus Dixon equals Carlton Davis. I agree with that. And I talked to someone about that the other day. He can slide inside. He can cover some slots if you need him to, some quicker slots. He can play on the boundary. I like him. I like him a lot. And I had a 5th round grade on him, though, simply because right now, didn't see a lot of him, but he got better. He got better at Washington. And that's a key. So I think he's a guy, if he tests well, doesn't have to be great. I think if he runs somewhere in the 4.2, not 4.42, but 4.42 to 4, maybe 4.5 range, anything after 4.5 seems to be a death sentence. Shouldn't be, but it seems to be a death sentence for a lot of teams and when they evaluate corners. But I like him. I like him as a football player a lot.
So you said 5th round grade, Walt?
Yeah, probably mid to late 4th, 5th at the latest. Because, you know, once those corners start coming off the board, now it's about who's your favorite of who's left. So some guys can get pushed up.
So, Jake, what do you think?
I see pretty similarly graded. I would probably say 4th round. I really liked his tape, and I think Walt was preaching. You just watch him and you see the coverage ability. And if I'm placing a bet, I'm going with a Washington secondary member. They just churn them out every single season, and they have for almost a decade now at this point in time. I saw a lot of what I saw in Elijah Molden when he was coming out of Washington, and that same ability. He's not an uber athlete by any means, but he understands what's happened in front of him, and he has that mirroring ability to play with that. And I think the physicality is there too. Maybe not the thickest build by any means, but he's not afraid to lay the lumber. He's not afraid to get loosed in there. So I think that is something he has working, his ability and the ball skills, the body control. Really liked all of that things. I think the experience is something of note. Like Walt said, we didn't see a lot of him, but spent all 4 years at Washington, didn't transfer out. I really like seeing that in today's game, in today's day and age. The size is the biggest concern I have, though. I think this is a guy that should probably kick inside at the next level, and I think he'll thrive there. I think this is a guy Going back to Elijah Molden. Molden was a guy that you could keep out there on first and second down, and then you would rotate in somebody there on third down for those pass coverages. I see Dixon as that guy that you'd bring in there on third down in those passing situations, and he's going to thrive for you. And if you're getting that in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, amazing. I think that's a value for you at that point in time, and I think he can offer something on special teams for you too. So I think you're getting a guy that can stick on the 53-man roster later in day 3. And that's awesome.
Cool.
Also, Trent McDuffie.
Oh, yeah.
He
Very similar.
McDuffie and Molden were 2 of my favorite corners in both of those respected drafts. And people just didn't think they could play outside. I'm like, he can obviously play outside. They both can play outside. There's the film that they can play outside. Oh, there you go again. People get caught up in the traits, though. You know.
Yep.
He ran 4.4. Well, 4.4 is not good enough. Since when is 4.4 not good enough? But this guy ran 4.32, and I'm more impressed by that.
So Walt,
and
you
a
said
40 means Jack. Yeah.
So Walt, you said you have a Big Ten background, right?
Oh yeah, I love the Big Ten. Love the Big Ten.
So
it's one of my favorite players.
We've had an Ohio State podcaster contact us and say she wants to come on and have us do an Ohio State draft podcast for just her guys. Tell us about Jordan Hancock from Ohio State.
Okay, I want to start out with a question. I want to ask you guys this: Jordan Hancock, Denzel Ward, and Davison. Is it Davison? I don't want to butcher the young man.
Ignobinson.
Okay. This is how I view those 3 guys. I think Jordan Hancock is the best football player out of the 3. I think Denzel Ward is the best pure cover corner. And I think the 3rd guy has the best measurables, but he just seemed to be – it's odd because the DBs at Ohio State tend to be more technically sound than he was, and I don't want to get to him right now. Sticking to Jordan Hancock, I think Jordan Hancock could possibly be this year's version of Brian Branch. I think he's that versatile of a football player. I want to go through some of my notes I do have on him. I think he's a very versatile, smart player. You're talking about 6'1", 195. So that's a guy that's in that range where he's still a good enough athlete to play corner as well as safety. You look at him at Ohio State, they played him on the boundary. He played in the slot. They lined him up on the line of scrimmage. He did everything for them. He did everything. Very explosive player, short range around the line of scrimmage. You're looking at alert, very decisive. And when a player plays decisive, we all know that means they know their keys. They know exactly what they're doing. You play fast, you play decisive when you're smart. And you're smart because you know exactly what's going on. He seemed to be the most smart, the smartest, most dependent on player in their secondary. Even though Denzel Ward may have more physical talent or whatever it may be, but I do think not Denzel. Yeah, it's Denzel Ward,
Burke.
Not Denzel Ward.
Burke.
No, that's Denzel Burke. I'm thinking about Denzel Ward with the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, Denzel Ward plays for the Browns. You had me fooled. They all play in the state of Ohio. You had me fooled there for a second too.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something else I think that's going to be very, very key for him. Very key, because a lot of teams in this day and age, especially my Detroit Lions, run a lot of cover 3 match, a lot of cover 4 palms. And the first thing I noticed about him in coverage, and I wrote it down, does a great job in match of transitioning fluidly and shadowing wide receivers. So this is a guy that can match up in slots against various slots. He can take some tight ends across the middle. He can line up on the boundary. He can do everything you need him to do. Just not an elite athlete. But he did come out of Ohio State, so it's a good chance he may run fast. But aside from everything else, I'm not sure how good of an overall elite athlete he is, but I do believe he's the best football player in that secondary, even if you throw Ransom in there.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, Jake, what do you think?
I think out of these 3, I'm pretty low on Burke, I feel like. And that was the guy that got all the hype this past year. And then we come in, and it just didn't really come to fruition. I think you mentioned it. We're talking Hancock. You got to bring up fluidity. because he's definitely got it oozing out. And I think that's something that's highly coveted. I think Bruce Lee said it many, many years ago that sometimes you have to be like water. You have to be able to be still. You have to be able to fill the glass, but you also have to be able to hit you like a tsunami. And he does that really well. I think you put him where you need to put him. And that comes back to the versatility that he offers you. So I think that's what's going to raise up his draft stock. 6'1", 195. I think that's perfectly fine. I have him listed at 190. And I mean, it's going to fluctuate. So size isn't a huge concern for me. I think the physical attributes are good. I think the ball skills are there. All big check marks. I think there were times where snaps would come and he didn't see it. So consistency may need to be a little bit better. There's just he's getting beat underneath on certain routes that he shouldn't get beat on. And as long as he's not getting beat deep, I'm cool with it. Allow that to progress. But I mean, this guy, he's gotten better every single year. I think at the end of the day, this is another day 3S prospect that can come in and probably play significant snaps for you. Maybe not as a starter early on, but he can come in and be that rotational piece for you. And I really like him. And out of the 3 OSU corners, I probably have him the highest as of right now.
I also think he's a guy who, depending on the team, like if you're it all depends. If you're an established team that's already got a lot of pieces and you're just looking for that Swiss Army knife type of guy, he's going to be smart. He's going to know his keys. He's going to know exactly what to do from day one. Because make no mistakes about it, he made all the plays for the most part in that Ohio State secondary last couple of years. And he was sort of a late bloomer. Burke was with the 5-star out of Florida. They came in. He drew all the comparisons to Denzel Ward. I thought he was good his first couple years. But once again, I think Denzel Ward is another guy who stuck around a little bit too long. Probably should have been left while his stock was at his highest. But, yeah, I think Hancock is a really good player. I would have, depending on what you need, I would have him somewhere around late second, maybe early third.
Yeah. So as I'm listening about the position versatility, if you're not a starting defensive back, it's like when you're not a starting offensive lineman. You need to play more than one of the spots. So, like being a Bills fan, there is a corner on the roster that plays boundary, slot, and safety. So if the boundary corner goes out, he's the guy off the bench. If the slot corner goes out, he's off the bench. He's the dime defensive back. And then if his safety gets hurt, he fills in for them too. So, and that's if you didn't know, and I've already Cam Lewis. I was about to say Cam Ward, but that's a different player. Cam Lewis for Buffalo. So definitely, as I'm listening to you guys explain Hancock, I'm saying I think he's going to be drafted on day 2. People are going to love that flexibility. And then you got to figure out what else is in my defensive back room to decide where you're going to put him. So, okay. Davison Ignobinson from Ohio State. So, Jake, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, for sure. Davison, we're talking tall corners today. I think he's the most athletic of the tall corners. I really like that for him. The ball skill's good. Versatility, maybe. I think this is a perimeter corner for you. Would like to see him add a little bit more mass to that lean frame. You're going to hear that a lot today. Love the wingspan. Dude can touch his kneecap standing up. And you got to love that. I think this is a guy, he started over at Ole Miss. He ends up transferring to Ohio State and he got better. Really like that for him. The route recognition is kind of the biggest thing I saw from him that give me concerns. I think hips little stiff at times, and I think he can improve upon that. And maybe the one thing that gives me my biggest concern is he's a penalty magnet. Dude gets real grabby at the top of the route tree, and we know NFL, they're going to throw those every single time, so it might get worse, which you can't do that at the next level. So maybe a higher upside than Hancock, but the floor is dang low. So that's something. And I don't think this is a guy that's going to contribute a whole lot on special teams. My favorite of the 3 OSU cornerbacks. Bill in the comments. And let's go ahead. Let's take a pause. We're getting close to the end here. Let's do a little commercial, Jim. If you're checking out the podcast for the first time, I don't know where we're sitting at viewers-wise, do us a couple favors. Be like Bill. Be like Bill. Drop comments down below. Ask questions to me, Walt, and Jim. Go follow Jim at NFL Draft Fanatics, No I in Fanatics, and go check out Walt over at Lions Avenue _80 as well and check out his content. Join us as we put out daily draft content every single day on the channel. Head over to YouTube, hit the subscribe, hit the bell, hit the like button so we can join and talk stuff with you all throughout this draft process. We're early into it. It's not even Christmas yet. We got 4 more months of this stuff. So, yeah, that's my notes on Davison, though.
So, first of all, Jake, I appreciate the commercial because I was about to do that after we hit Davison. But while we're on the commercial break, Walt, you want to kind of introduce yourself, tell everybody kind of who you are, how they can find you?
Certainly. So the name's Walt Stringer. I was senior draft analyst at East West Football for 3 years. That publication is no longer in service, but for those 3 years that I was with that publication, I covered the Detroit Lions article-wise. I also covered the NFL draft all 3 years, put out my big board's top 100 players as well as scouting reports. Now I do, that's right. Also, I did cover the Big Ten for Sports News Radio for one season as well a couple of years ago. Currently, right now, I cover my Detroit Lions exclusively, Lions Avenue. You can find us right on YouTube at that underscores title right there, or you can also just type in Lions Avenue and it'll bring it right up. You can also follow me on Facebook as well as LinkedIn. Just type in my name and you will find me.
Fantastic. And Jake, you want to talk about Glory Day Sports there for a second?
Yeah, just head over to Twitter. If you're already over there, just type in Glory Day Sports, or you can talk Titans football, talk NFL draft. We can talk your favorite Pop-Tart flavor, whatever it is. We're talking anything and everything. You join me on the Morning Glory Show every Thursday morning, 7 a.m. Central Standard Time with B. Will and Jonathan Miller as we talk all things Titans as we wrap this up. But yeah, just Glory Day Sports, all social medias.
Fantastic. So, as Jake alluded to, we have daily draft content on this channel. So if you normally turn in Tuesdays and you're expecting to see Bill is traveling for work. Bill filled in for Jake yesterday. Jake normally does running backs and linebackers
Little flip-flop.
On Mondays with Josh. So I believe we're going to see Jake back at his regularly scheduled time next week. But Jake and Bill kind of did a flip-flop, and that is completely cool. We have a lot of people at the Draft Professor, and I don't want to say everybody's an interchangeable part because very few people make me laugh as much as Jake. So I'm glad when Jake couldn't do Mondays, I got my laughs in on Tuesday. He's definitely, from a sense of humor standpoint, Jake, you are up there with just anybody that's in my life with who makes me laugh. So
well, I appreciate that.
I enjoy that. So with that being said, Walt, let's go back to Davison Ignobinson because I don't think you've had your turn to say what you think about this gentleman.
Yeah, I don't want to be overly critical, but got to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of him. Really not, out of the 3 corners. He didn't spend his entire career there, which could explain why he's not as refined as the other corners, I think, in coverage. 6'2", 193, borderline 200 pounds. Very long arms, you guys mentioned. He's got that above prototypical size, height, weight. I think a lot of teams want those 6'2" corners now. We're getting them at an abundance, crazy enough as it is. There's a ton of them in this class right here. But I look at him and I see a guy that, if he goes to the right system, right coaching staff, maybe he can be rebuilt. You know, I look at his footwork. He may have some of the worst footwork I think of the guys we talked about tonight. He's very slow to react to inside moves. Very handsy, stays handsy for too long, has a bad habit of playing with his hands all the way through coverage. If you go back, you watch the Oregon game. Oregon almost tore him a new one. Just the fact that Dylan Gabriel wasn't really throwing the ball to his side of the field. He wasn't looking to really attack him like that. All day long, guys are beating him across his face. Consistently. I also question how fast he is. He doesn't look like he's running too fast, exerting too much energy, but he's constantly always flailing his arms out. You notice most corners, fast corners, you're trained in track. You lock the elbows in, no wasted movement. He runs with an awful lot of wasted movement. So I'm not sure if he's faster and he's just being taught improperly or whatever, but it looks to me like he's a 6'2", 193-pound corner that maybe has to be rebuilt. And I'm not sure what type of DB coaching he got at Ole Miss. He hasn't been at Ohio State for that long. Could go back, but right now it's the tape between him and those other two corners. I think it's like night and day. You know, I'm a Denzel Burke guy. I think Burke is a guy that similar to C.J. Henderson. I hope he turns out to be better than C.J. Henderson, who came out of Florida a few years ago in that Jeff Okudah draft. C.J. Henderson was a guy who got cooked a decent amount in Florida, but you kind of scratched it off because he had the height, he had the weight, he had the 40 time, he had all the measurables, and he was out there covering constantly the best wide receivers in the country playing in the SEC. You know, but he did have issues at the next level. But I think if you put him in the right system, maybe with the right coach, because I think he's a zone corner. I don't think he's a man corner at all. And it's hard to get guys who play with their hands in college to stop doing it at the NFL level. Because once you get to the NFL level, if you don't trust your athleticism enough to not be a penalty magnet in college, same thing with quarterbacks who throw interceptions. Guys who are mistake makers in college tend to be mistake makers in the NFL. Corners who are penalty magnets and grabby in college, they tend to be that same thing in the NFL level. And guys who grab consistently are guys who don't trust the athleticism. There were snaps against Penn State. There were snaps against Oregon where he was in position. And he also has a bad habit of opening up the gate too quick. He gives away way too many free releases and he reaches too much. So, you know, if you look at the height, you look at the weight, I think he's going to run pretty well. Just looking at some of these guys, their height, their weight, their body builds, the fact that he does come from Ohio State, so they all pretty much have a track coach background at some point in time. I do think he probably will run well, and someone will take a gamble on him. Based off of those traits, I got a 5th to 6th round grade on him.
Okay. Okay, so Jake, you want to kick off Tahveon Nicholson from Louisville?
Yeah. Tahveon is a interesting prospect, a little bit undersized, but gets to play some outside too. I think he's got some of that scheme versatility for you, Swiss Army knife, if you will. I think he can stick with the shiftier slot receivers, so I think he probably is going to kick inside at the next level. But dude, he's a coverage magnet. Yeah, I mean, you like what the tape shows. The durability comes into concern as well. I think turning and running, I think he's got enough speed for the position, but undersized. You got to come back to that 180, and I have probably a little bit significantly smaller than that. So the size is definitely a concern, especially when he's dealt with injuries already in his career. I think it's going to be real hard to contribute at the next level. The biggest ability is being on the field for him, and that's going to be a concern. Tackling, he doesn't offer you anything in run support. I just at the size, it's too hard. I think you're getting a potential slot defender at the next level. This is a guy I'm probably not drafting as of right now, though. I didn't see enough on tape to warrant the draft pick over the size at this point in time.
Okay. Walt, did you want to add anything onto Tahveon Nicholson, or you want me to move on to the next one?
I agree 100%.
Okay.
You know, you see some flashes from him. You like the fact he did come out of Illinois. He did spend some time over there. They've been, a DB mag, not a DB magnet, but a DB school. Oh, That sounds terrible. I don't want to call I don't want to call Illinois the DB school. But yeah, they've been pushing out some pretty nice DBs the past few years. He's similar to Garrett Williams, who came out a year ago. I think a guy around the same height, weight, provides some man coverage skills, provides some zone, a little bit of both. Not the most physical tackler, kind of a tweener. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's Garrett. Yeah, Garrett Williams is still with the Arizona Cardinals, if I'm not mistaken. Haven't really just seen enough of them. That's the thing. Is some of these guys sometimes they just get caught up in the matrix. Sometimes you go from spending 2 years at a school where you don't play much, then you leave, and then you transfer to a school where it's a more crowded room, so you're still not playing as much, but then on top of that, the scheme doesn't really fit you. Some of these guys leave college after 3, 4, 5 years, never having their real potential even tapped into. Some of it's their fault because they jump around too damn much now, for my liking, and it's harder to find tape on these guys. But I think he's got to have some ability. But right now, if you look at the rest of his class, the guys that are already in it and the guys we expect the underclassmen to jump in it, I don't see him as draftable right now.
Okay.
I will say this on Tahveon. My co-host B Will, he was on this guy from the rip last season. We were talking about Jarvis Brownlee, who the Titans drafted in the 5th round, who's playing great for the Titans this season. He's kind of that L'Jarius Sneed small mold, a little bit smaller, can play in press man, though, and has great mirroring abilities. He was talking up Tahveon last season, and him and Quincy Riley, and they come in this season. I mean, there's a reason Quincy will be talked about. If you already haven't talked about him, Jim, he'll be talked on a future episode just because of what he brings to the table. So Tahveon, same mold, getting great coaching over there at Louisville, I think, this year for sure.
Yep. So on the Draft Professor, we cover a lot of players, and we're essentially sorting through to try to tell you who the top 175 are. In order to do that, we're weeding through. We will have some UDFAs or some small school guys in some episodes or two. And we have a lot of really good evidence that works. For example, at 7 p.m. tomorrow, one of the players that we covered that we said, oh, who is this small school guy? We're interviewing him live on Mrs. R Relevant. So Mr. Andreas Keaton from Temple will be live on this podcast tomorrow. So I know, Jake, I think you delivered a scouting report on him, and it's who is this guy, right? He may have not been on the radar, but then we go and look and we say, okay, he should be on the radar, that kind of thing. So yeah, we will cover players from all schools, all shapes and sizes, and we are sorting through, and we're building our big boards at the same time that a lot of our followers are building theirs. So that being said, we are preparing for the big finish. So we have cornerback Domani Jackson from Alabama. Walt, you want to kick this one off?
Sure. Big fan. I've been following Domani Jackson for about 3 years now. Don't really consider the first year at USC. Didn't play much. I think he appeared in 5 games. Only got targeted twice. Gave up 2 catches though. All those catches count, Domani. But once he got better. He got better his second year at USC. But then once again, I go back to how's the coaching, because he got to Bama, and he looks like a completely different guy. This is a guy who is a big-time athlete coming out of high school, ran a 10.25 in 100 meters, has a very high ceiling, 6'1", 200 pounds, very strong frame, overall build. I think he's gotten better with his hands as well in regards to not using them until he needs to. Solid feet. His feet have gotten tremendously better at Bama. Doesn't panic downfield, gets his head around with nice snap to track the football, and I think that's a lost art. A lot of corners would get more pass breakups. A lot of corners would get more interceptions if they didn't panic and they showed some confidence and they got their heads around and they just made a play on the football. For a guy who I think was just a big-time athlete coming out of high school who pretty much had to play corner, I don't think he can play anything other than that. He has really, really risen. And that's under Alabama's tutelage. Does a good job of staying squared, fluid hips, and transitioning from mid to deep while still watching the football. Watch numerous games of him. Once that ball gets downfield, once the receiver crosses his face, he has the elite speed. So he's a guy that I've seen let receivers get on top of him. He'll peak, he'll close, he'll break up the play. I like him a lot. I like him a lot. And you go back to the Georgia game, there was a lot of chippiness in that game, a lot of pushing and shoving going on after play. He didn't back down from anybody. Dude only had a cup of coffee at Alabama, and he's already pushing Georgia around. So I think he's a guy who people have way too low right now. If you're looking at the cornerback position and the physical traits and the fact that he's still a project and he's gotten better. 5-star prospect coming out of high school. And if you're just looking at the physical traits, I think he could be 1A if you're talking about just physical talent wise with Travis Hunter. I think he's that good of an athlete. And come draft time, he's going to run fast. He's going to jump high. He's going to impress people. And I've seen some publications that have a 3rd-round grade on him. I don't see it. I think he's probably a mid-second right now. And once the draft process starts, people get reacquainted with who he is. Because all these NFL teams know who you are. They know who you are in high school. They know who you were in college. They know your story. They know you spent X amount of time at USC. And then you got better your second year at USC. Then you transferred to Alabama. And he's playing the best that he's played in his college career this year. If he leaves early, I think there's a really good chance that he can be a mid-first to late first.
Yep. I'm going to come back to that. But before I come back to that, I want to hear what Jake has to say.
I think Walt hit the nail on the head. I think this is a guy that's not getting talked about enough. We talked about lots of diamonds in the rough tonight. I think Domani Jackson is just a diamond. I think this is a 1st-round pick. I think when it's all said and done in April, he gets his name called in the first day just because of what he offers. He went to USC, like Walt was saying. Anytime a 5-star has played under Alex Grinch, I believe he has not done them service. And there's a reason he's no longer employed at USC. And Domani, he comes over to Alabama, and he puts it together. And I think we saw everything that earned him that 5-star status. He has the ability and the versatility to play on the outside. He has that physical profile and that presence out there. I think the athleticism is elite for the position. Almost prototypical size and build that I'd like to see for my corner. Ball skills are great. I think the experience is one of the biggest question marks, but like we were talking about earlier, that can be a pro or a con. If this is where he's at now, and I can expect him to get better with good coaching, I'm all about that. I'm all about that. He's still young too, and we can hop into that. Where I think he could get a little bit better is the physicality in the run game. There are times where I saw him shy away from contact, but I think he has that within him. And I think that's something I don't have to worry about him being undersized for that. I think he'll put it together. So, yeah, I think he's a 1st-round pick. You draft him if you want the speed. You draft him if you want the size. You draft him if you want the coverage ability. And I can tell you, most teams do. And that's why he's going to hear his name called very early in the draft.
Yeah. So for anybody listening, and there are a lot of you listening, okay, so I'm just going to rattle off a couple cornerback names and a single adjective to describe them. Will Johnson, injured. Siobhan Ravel, injured. Benjamin Morrison, injured. Those would be 3 cornerbacks that might be taken before Domani Jackson. Okay, so if you're a general manager in the NFL and your job is on the line and you need a corner in round 1 because you're picking at the back of round 2, right? So maybe you're the Baltimore Ravens that need a corner and you're at the back of round 2, Jackson's not going to be there by that time, right? We heard at least a mid-second round grade. This is a player that's going to be talked about in round 1, right? Because if you need a corner, there's a lot of corners in this class right now that are injured, that they haven't played in 2 or 3 months in some cases. So there's going to be Domani Jackson, and then there's going to be other players that are covered on other episodes. But this is a name you need to get used to in the top 50. I don't think he was in Dane Brugler's top 50 that was released about a month ago. But he probably needs to be in that conversation.
Yeah, I would personally. I would bet on him. Wait, when it comes to me and my corners, and like Jake said, I like my corners 6 foot, 6'1". Once you start getting to 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", you start sacrificing some quickness. You start sacrificing a lot of things, and a lot of those corners come with physical limitations. He fits the profile I like. And honestly, if it came down to him and those guys you mentioned, I would probably roll the dice on him before, simply because I think he's still so young, and he's got the physical traits, and he's obviously coachable. Like, in 1 year, he went to Alabama, and everything about him cleaned up, technique-wise. From a physical standpoint, he's got that Patrick, that sort of that thick Patrick Peterson type of body. How people thought when Peterson came out, he might outgrow the position and have to move to safety. He eventually did move to safety. Domani's put together, man. Like, he's put together like he could probably get to 210. And I told someone, comparison-wise, he reminded me a lot of Xavier Howard. Overall coverage-wise, body type-wise, height, weight, arm length. He's not the technician I think that that Xavier was coming out of college, because Xavier was another diamond. He was a diamond in the rough. But I do think people are more in tune with Domani Jackson than people were with Xavier Howard coming out of college. But if you're just talking about the traits, and you're talking about getting somebody in your cornerback room as an NFL organization that you can teach with tons of tools, he's going to impress a lot of people. And we all know that once the NFL draft combine comes, once guys start running those 4.2s and 4.3, I'm not sure if he's going to run 4.2. It's possible, and it wouldn't shock me if he did. I believe he's going to be somewhere in that 4.31 to 4.38 range. He's going to jump well. His broad jump is going to be well. He's going to be a guy that's going to check a lot of boxes. And from everything I've heard from USC and Alabama, he's a good character kid. You know, Bama don't take those type of kids that often. Those are more Georgia type of players. But just being honest. Just being honest, man. Those Georgia kids.
Throwing shots right across the bow on his first podcast. Look at that. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Those Georgia kids are crazy breed, man. But I'm a fan. I was questioning how everybody else felt about Domani Jackson. I see a lot of publications. Some have him as a third or fourth. I don't get it. You know, I think everybody evaluates these players differently. Some people grade on. I look at, and as I told you, Jim, a couple days ago, I have my set of criteria that I like, but I won't venture outside. I mean, I will venture outside of it. And some teams just don't want to grow players. And I think that's a big problem that Mike Tomlin touched on. Some coaches don't believe in coaching anymore. You know, the Detroit Lions is one of those few organizations that believe in drafting and growing their players, which I do believe he's a guy that could be on the board for us potentially. Hey, late first round, maybe early second. Can't get too many Alabama players.
Didn't Detroit draft corners in round 1 and 2 last year?
Well, hey, that's a good question. If Tahveon Arnold was in this class, would he go ahead of Domani Jackson?
Oh, that's a great question. I wasn't the biggest Tahveon Arnold truther last season, but I think I would still, man, that's like right here and there. I would put Arnold just over Jackson as of right now. And maybe as I watch more tape, maybe I'll fall more in love with him. But right now, I think Arnold just had a little bit more that I got to see on tape as of right now.
Yeah.
That was a good question. That one didn't even come from me. That was a good job, Walt.
I think I would have him over Kool-Aid, though, if they were in the same class.
Yeah, he has better physical traits than both of them.
100% agree there.
And another corner that's probably not being talked about a lot is Justin Walley from Minnesota. So, Jake, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, Justin, I've got to watch very little of his tape, but what I got to see, I did enjoy. I think this is a key contributor on special teams at the next level. I think that's where he's going to make his hay just because of what he brings. I think physicality, even at 5'11", 190, he's that Chihuahua with the pit bull mentality. I liked what I saw there. Consistency and coverage, that was the biggest concern. I think if he can see the field, it says a slot defender, obviously, at that size. But the speed, I don't know if he's an uber athlete as well to thrive at that position, which is a big concern. So I think this is a guy that did improve at his time over at Minnesota. I think potential role for him, though, is coming out of the draft. He's going to stick with the team. He's going to go try out at a rookie minicamp, and he's going to try to fight for one of those special teams positions. And I think he could do that. Yeah.
So do you have him in day 2 or day 3?
I have him as an undrafted free agent.
You have him as UDFA. Okay.
Correct.
I think you're really low on him.
He is.
That's
cold, man.
But Walt,
Yeah.
Walt, what did you see with Justin Walley?
I like Justin, man. I've seen a lot of Justin at Minnesota the past few years. Also watching him with Tyler Nubin. I think he's got decent size, 5'11", 195, closing speed on short routes. I think is unmatched underneath. He's another one of those corners he's a zone corner. I think he plays better when things are in front of him. I do think he has a little bit more versatility than that. He can play some man, some off man, some press. I think he's a difference maker in the run game as well. He's a more than willing tackler. Once again, he's not a corner that I have to tell to go tackle. He's going to willingly go in there and tackle and wrap up. And he's a fast corner that stays in phase. I'm not sure how fast he is, but a lot of fast corners typically don't stay in phase. We talked about the kid from Alabama we just talked about.
Domani Jackson.
Domani Jackson. Domani has so much speed and so much confidence in his speed that he can let receivers get on top of him and recover and make plays and peek in the backfield. He's fast. To me, I think he's fast. I believe he's fast. Now, how fast he runs ultimately, we don't know. But he looks fast on film, and he stays in phase consistently. And a lot of fast corners don't. He's a fast corner that believes in staying in phase, believes in staying in the wide receiver's hip pocket. And he looks very fluid in coverage, never looks rushed or panicked. I don't know why people are that really down on him. I thought he played pretty well at Minnesota. I don't think there's anything really special about him. If you're talking about if he's my nickel, depending on what the matchups could be, I think he's athletic enough to match up against some bigger slots, maybe the Roma Dunzes or the Keenan Allens out there for that matter. But I think he's a good football player. I do. And I think I would have him somewhere around late 4th, because you got to realize also once these corners start coming off the board, some of these guys get pushed up. I'm not sure how low national publications are on them. Haven't really checked it out. But I've seen a decent amount of Justin Walley over the past couple years. I think he's a good football player. I wouldn't mind having him, and that's kind of my measurement with these guys. Would I want them in my secondary for my team? Whether it's the Detroit Lions, the Tennessee Titans, or the Buffalo Bills. If Brad Holmes drafted Justin Walley in the 6th round, I wouldn't be mad at it.
Okay, so it's interesting. So, Jake, and maybe I was a little hard on you. Okay, so with people that are on the Mrs. R Relevant podcast, I think they're either grading them super higher than both of you, or this is a player we need to keep talking about. Because I believe I've heard it from a few people that this is a day 2 guy. If you have a zone corner scheme, you could take him in round 2 or 3. Like if Buffalo grabbed him in round 2, I don't know that I'd hate it. Because I may have to check, but I thought I heard a comp to Rasul Douglas, who's already on Buffalo. Like that kind of corner. But I'd have to go back and watch one of the older episodes to make sure that it was Walley that was comped to Douglas. But that was what
I'll have to go back
heard.
and watch more tape for sure, because I did not see that as of what I saw. So only 2 games in, though. There's lots of games to watch. So
Yep. And it should be pointed out to anybody listening, and there's a lot of you listening, we're considering this to be a mid-season scouting report, right? The games aren't all done, and we really don't sort the players too much, right? So when we're putting our episodes together, we try to make sure that we have like one first or second round guy in every episode so that there's at least somebody fun to talk about. But we're pretty much just looking for top 175, and there's plenty of people that had him there already, that they were in the top 175. Says, yeah, you want people to cover them, you want people to talk about them. So, and like I said, I think I heard that he was comped to Rasul Douglas, but at the same time, I'm listening to scouting reports on close to 225 players. So if I get a couple of them mixed up, I'm not taking notes, right? My hands are like, open and stuff right now. But yeah. So at this point, we have finished our docket for the day. So I want to thank Walt. Definitely thank you for coming on. I know that you and I think, had been talking for the better part of 4 or 5 days about you doing this. So truly appreciate you coming on, giving this a try. And I'm sure you and I will be texting and talking. And to everybody listening, we have daily draft content. We've got a couple of podcasts tomorrow. One is the interview with Andreas Keaton at 7 p.m. Eastern. And then there will be an episode a little bit later that is going to cover, I believe, primarily offensive tackles and edge players. And we have content coming to you all week. So if there's a player you want us to watch, please ask. Can't guarantee we're going to say yes, but we haven't said no yet. So on behalf of Jake, Walt, myself at NFL Draft Fanatic, and everybody at the Draft Professor, thank you very much for watching, everybody, and have a great evening. Thank you for watching this episode of Mrs. R Relevant, the daily draft podcast brought to you by the Draft Professor Podcast Network. If you have not already, please hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Please hit the like button on YouTube. Follow the Draft Professor page on Twitter at NFL Draft Fanatic. There is no I am fanatic. We have content coming to you every day. You can see some of the people delivering that daily content to you on the slide now. Find them on Twitter. Give them a follow. There's always good dialogue on Twitter, and that's how you can find even more draft content than you saw in this episode. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.